Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's start this new book, Alien Contact, Top Secret UFO Files Revealed by Timothy Good, in this case, starting with Chapter 1. So I already did another video where it was doing an acknowledgement and more of an introduction. This one actually starts Chapter 1, and then it'll go for several parts, and then I'll continue the next chapter afterward. Very interesting stuff. Some people already liked this book. I like it as well. I think it's going to present a nice, clear set of examples throughout a multitude of subjects within the world of alien UFOs. Already, this first chapter is titled Aerial Confrontation, and so it gives you an idea, essentially, of what the chapter will entail. Here's going to have several examples of actual one-on-one fights, if you could imagine that, with some UFOs out there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start this chapter 1, part 1, and then I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it afterwards. So once again, the chapter is called Aerial Confrontation, and here's what it says. It was a clear night in the early summer of 1947. The young pilot was growing tired as he cruised in his Lockheed P-38 Lightning at 9,000 to 10,000 feet en route from Grand Rapids, Michigan to Los Angeles, where he was due to participate in the Bendrick Trophy race the following day. Shortly after passing over the Colorado River near Blythe, California, he was alerted by something so startling that it has left an indelible impression to this day. Bill Lear described the incident to me as follows. He said, "Suddenly I looked off to my left side and I saw a round fuselage with round windows in it." And of course, at that time, the only commercial airliner that was flying that had round windows was a DC-4. And instantly, judging from my position in relation to that body, I judged that I was about 50 feet from running into the trailing edge of the wing of that airplane. So no matter how hopeless it seems, you always try to avoid something. I was gaining on it, so I immediately racked the P-38 over into a 90-degree bank to the right, pulled as hard as I could, almost with my eyes closed, expecting to crash into the wing of that airplane, and then to my astonishment, nothing happened. I breathed a sigh of relief, and when I figured I was about 90 degrees off to the westerly heading, which would have put me north, I rolled out. And as I rolled out, I looked over to my left, and it was still there. And this is out over the desert. I'd already passed all the lights behind me, and there it still was with the little round windows looking for all the world like DC-4 windows. But the light behind the windows was not white. It was a bit yellowish. And here I was in exactly the same position as I had been before, and I thought, this is totally impossible. But the brain won't accept that. When you're about to die and when you're about to crash into the trailing edge of the wing of another airplane, you don't stop to think, how the hell did it get there? You just get out of there. There's no time to think. So I simply executed the same maneuver, rolled to the right in a 90-degree bank, pulled as hard as I could again, thinking to myself, my God, what is happening? That DC-4 can't follow me now, but nonetheless, there it was. And when I rolled out the second time, heading east, it was gone. But there was no question, if it had been an aircraft, I would, on the first occasion, have plowed into the trailing edge of that wing. The second time, there was no way it could have been an aircraft. In 1947, I had not read anything about any flying saucers or the cigar-shaped things. I was so relieved that I hadn't run into any airplane. Nothing could have stayed pace with me like that thing did. I couldn't explain it, as I was so tired that I simply made a 180-degree turn and continued on to the west, and then finally landed in California. Bill Lear is the son of the late William P. Lear, designer of the Learjet, and together with his brother John, also a pilot, has done a considerable amount of research into UFOs, as I soon learned when we discussed the subject in his London home in 1990. One aspect of the 1947 sighting bothered me, however. I said, "Bill, the skeptic would say that you were just over-fatigued and were hallucinating," I remarked after listening to his account. And he replied, "When you're flying along and you see something that you recognize, you suddenly come very much awake. I mean, the adrenaline starts pumping." And I was awake, standing right on my tiptoes in the airplane practically, because that really gets your heart started. To see something casually Okay, I'll buy a hallucination, possible hallucination because of fatigue, or you misinterpreted lights on the ground for something that might be flying next to you. But when you turn into the black sky at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and there are only stars above you, and there are these round windows, that fuselage that you can make out the shape of, and those round windows with very pale yellow lights behind them, and you don't know what the hell it is, except the only thing you recognize is it's got a fuselage, then it must have wings, and you're about to plow into the trailing edge of the wings, you move and you get the hell out of there. Okay, the first time you panic and brake right, and if there's nothing, okay, you just saw some lights on the ground and you were tired and you perhaps had a mild hallucination. But the second time, black sky and it's still there, no way. So sightings by pilots cannot easily be dismissed, according to Dr. Richard Haynes, who has devoted much of his professional career as an aerospace scientist to investigating the mysteries of human vision and perception. There have now been well over 3,000 sightings of UFOs by military and civilian pilots. Next segment is called Near Misses with Helicopters. Thanks to Elsa Lee of Quest International, who first uncovered the basic details of this case, I interviewed a helicopter pilot who had an alarming near miss with an unidentified flying object in England in 1988. Because the name of the witness is internationally known, he has requested anonymity, and I have deleted certain names and places from the following report. This incident occurred on February 21st, 1988 at 1850 hours in the vicinity of Chipping Warden, Northamptonshire, as the pilot, accompanied by his wife, was flying a Bell Jet Ranger en route from Bakewell, Derbyshire, to his home in a southern country. His report states as follows. He said, I passed 5 miles west of Daventry VOR at 2200 1033. I first noticed extremely bright red flashing light from the southwest. I initially thought it to be an aircraft, but the light looked too bright and wasn't moving relative to the background illuminations. I then thought it to be a beacon marking the top of the mist or the mast, though that seemed to be too far and too bright and too high. And so I continued on 170 track, and after an estimated 3 minutes, during which time my wife had been continuously watching that light, we suddenly appeared to be on a collision course with this flying object carrying this light. I immediately commenced descent, maintaining 120 knots airspeed, but the object appeared to be homing in on us and also descending. Throughout this, the object had been at approximately 2 o'clock. The object continued to appear to home in on us until I had descended to 1300, closing at an estimated speed of 300 to 400 knots when it suddenly commenced a turn to the rig, ending up on a track parallel to my own and perhaps 800 yards to the west. At this point, I estimate my position to have been 5 miles northeast of Banbury, Oxfordshire. Once the object moved approximately half a mile ahead, it appeared to stop and then reverse direction on a reciprocal to my own at an estimated 1,800 feet, again approximately 800 yards to the west. The object had a very bright red light and 2 dimmer white lights each side of it. It was very large, estimated about 300 feet long. The speed of its reciprocal and final seen course was estimated 500 knots relative to my own. I then climbed to 1,800 feet and then continued en route. Now, the witness immediately reported the near miss to London Information. Subsequent inquiries about conflicting traffic to London Information, Loughton, Cranfield, Birmingham, Coventry, Briz Norton, Upper Heyford, and Herne established that none had any traffic that was even remotely like to have been in the area at that time. Following receipt of a UFO report, air traffic controllers are required to contact London Air Traffic Control Center immediately and to submit a written report to the Ministry of Defense. Visibility had been excellent at that time, 30 miles, so the pilot told me. He was unable to determine precisely the shape of the object, but indicated that it could have been rectangular. The red light flashed in the regular sequence, while the white lights remained constant. Yet he is absolutely convinced that the object he saw bore no other resemblance to any conventional aircraft. The red light was far too bright for a normal anti-collision light, and he added that he could think of no plane that could change direction or stop so quickly. Another incident involving a helicopter's near miss with a UFO took place in the vicinity of Nakhik Airport, Carbondino Balkar, on March 7, 1990, when the crew of an Mi-2 commanded by V. Silka was ordered to investigate a low-flying, unidentified object that had been tracked on radar since 10:40 a.m. The helicopter was at 3,000 feet when visual contact was made with the object, which was flying at a lower altitude. It was described by the crew as spherical in shape and about 3 meters or 11.5 feet in diameter. The UFO then ascended to the same height as the helicopter and began to move away, but the helicopter soon caught up. Suddenly, the UFO turned and approached the helicopter at a high speed. The pilot made a 90-degree turn to avoid a collision, and the UFO made that same maneuver. An immediate descent by the pilot was not reciprocated by the UFO, however, which stopped and then returned to its original position before disappearing. The air traffic controller reported that both the helicopter and UFO could clearly be seen on radar until the moment the helicopter began to make its approach from a distance of 3¾ miles, at which point both targets disappeared from the screen for about 20 seconds. And so the incident, lasting 23 minutes, was also tracked by an air defense radar station. Then that's it. Let's go ahead and let's pause it here. And then that way we can talk about these confrontations. Fascinating stuff, right? This is again from the book Alien Contact, Top Secret UFO Files Revealed by Timothy Good. Chapter 1, Aerial Confrontation. It's definitely living up to that title. Already, we see some examples involving some near misses with regards to both aircraft and helicopters in the world of UFOs. Like here we have this one involving Bill Lear, who is apparently related to a family member, the owner of, or the creator of Lear Jets. And in his case, he was stating he saw a round fuselage with round windows that look like a DC-4, and no matter how much he tried to bank to the right and do so at almost impossible angles that no other plane could catch up unless they were, from another world, like is the case here, there it was again. He did that twice, and then there it was right next to him. He thought to himself, my God, what is happening? That DC-4 is what he thought it was, can't follow me. But then he realized there it was. So fascinating stuff. And then when the author was questioning him about it, he was telling him, first thing that comes to mind is to not crash because of how close this UFO was all of a sudden. And then whenever that happens, the thing is to get out, but then it's still around that area. So he realized quickly that this was not a regular craft, especially with the speed and the way it was able to make those turns. And then afterwards, he's still mystified to this day, essentially, as to what it was. And then there was those encounters involving those helicopters. How fascinating is that? I think that's a first when it comes to my channel here. Here you have one encounter that occurred in 1988 involving a helicopter with two people in there, a man and a wife, and then they were there moving towards one location. And then this thing, all of a sudden, again, ended up closing in at a really top speed to them, like really fast. In fact, it was estimated at being 300 to 400 knots. And again, it was turning on pinpoint positions that nobody else, no other aircraft could easily do so, at least somewhere in this world, something that was man-made, in other words. And it was considerably large at 300 feet long. Can you imagine something that big and able to essentially move on a dime so easily? It truly has to be from another world. And then you had the last situation involving that other near miss, where it was a UFO somewhere that took a vicinity called Nalchik Airport. And then that's where the helicopter, again, almost ran into the UFO. But the UFO actually approached them as well. And then when the helicopter decided to move down, the UFO kind of mimicked it, but then stopped, returned back to its original place. Both of them showed up on the radar, and then both of them disappeared for a couple of, I think it was 20 seconds or so. And then afterward, only the helicopter showed up there. The UFO did not. So there's evidence right there of a UFO showing up on radar. I wonder if that radar was kept somewhere, like if you could actually find that particular footage, what was recorded, and then that way it shows on a blip, actual proof of a UFO. But interesting stuff. I was looking already at some of the other future parts, and sure enough, there's plenty more aerial confrontation. So great stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.